It's time for the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Good morning, Charleston. Welcome to another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. I'm your host, Brian Beatty. Thanks for joining me this morning. I want to talk about where we are as a real estate market today. We're going to go over a few things from last year. We're going to talk about really just the year in general. We'll talk about a few different kind of categories of our market, whether it's new construction or distressed properties, where we are with prices, sales, how long things are taking to sell. We'll get a little bit more granular with regard to what we saw last quarter, the fourth quarter. We'll talk about where we are right now and ultimately what you can expect, right? If you're thinking of buying or selling a home this year, this is a show designed to educate and inform you on the current market here in Charleston, South Carolina. And it also educates you on the process of buying and selling a home so that you're an informed consumer. So you know what to look out for. You know the right questions to ask. And you know how ultimately to win. Really, that's what we're after. We want our clients to win in their transaction. We want them to get the best price for their home when they sell it. We want them to get a great deal on a house when they buy it. We go through this process with folks. We've done it over 1,500 times. We've sold about $1 billion worth of real estate here in Charleston. So, and that's over about a 20-year career of mine. So would love the opportunity for anybody listening, if they have some specific questions about an area, about a neighborhood, about their home, about where to buy, where to look for opportunity. Maybe you're an opportunistic investor. Are there some deals that are starting to come out? The short answer is yes. We'll talk more about that. But if you want to reach out to me, if you're thinking of engaging with a high caliber, experienced real estate agent that still actively helps people buy and sell homes, right? Not just send you off to members of a team, then feel free to give me a call. My number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. The website is listingsincharleston.com, listingsincharleston.com. And just as a quick reminder, every time I'm here in the studio and I'm recording the show, we also put video to that so that we can post these videos on YouTube and our social media accounts. So if you ever want to go online and kind of put a face with the voice, I guess, check us out on YouTube, the Brian Beatty team, the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Just search Brian Beatty. You'll find us. We've got over 1,000 videos and, of course, podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Anyways, let's get into it. Every year, let me put this a little bit more eloquently. Every month, our Association of Realtors puts out data so that we can better understand the trends within the market. Now, some of that data is a little limited, I guess I could say, or it's just generic, right? We all know that real estate is not just local, it's hyper local, right? Sometimes your neighborhood or even your street can be different from other areas of Charleston. Maybe you're in a neighborhood in Mount Pleasant that's not performing as well as other surrounding communities, or maybe you're the one that has all the attention right now and you're seeing that properties are selling quickly and at great prices. There's a lot of inconsistency in our market right now. So please take some of this information with a bit of a grain of salt. Really, the goal here is to help you guys understand the trajectory of the market. That's really what everybody wants to know is where are we going, right? What's going to happen with real estate prices? Should I sell my home now? Would it be better than selling it next year? Should I list it in the spring, summer, fall? I mean, all these questions we field as real estate agents every day, right? Same thing with buying. Am I going to buy now and then prices are suddenly going to be lower than what I purchased that property for, right? Nobody wants to catch a falling sword. So the question, of course, is, are prices going to fall, right? It's a very good question to ask, especially if you're thinking about buying a house. And so let's kind of, before we answer some of those questions, let's understand first kind of where we've been, where we are as a market, and really what happened last year, right? We had a bit of a challenging year last year. We had a lot going on that was not necessarily real estate related, right? Think back to all the just stuff, filled that in with things like the government shutdown and just all the stuff that's been happening politically, right? We've had a bunch of economic issues that show up in the course of our conversation in the form of interest rates that haven't come down at levels that we would have hoped they would have. Now, the good news, of course, on that is that they have come down this year so far. We're actually, I think last week we hit a 3-year low. Interest rates with 5s in front of them. We had Derek Goulet of Fairway Independent Mortgage on the show to help better understand the state of the mortgage market. So if you missed that, check that video out on YouTube, or just go to our podcast on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play, and you can see that most recent episode. There's some really great information in there. But generally speaking, right, our market, how did we do compared to, say, 2024? Very, very similarly, I'll put it that way, right? Sales were up a little under, 2%, so fairly flat. I mean, pending sales were up about 3% compared to 2024, but really not much movement there. When you look at listings, right, properties on the market for sale, which has been the problem for, let's be honest, about a decade. We've had a decade or so of national underbuilding. We have not been putting enough supply of new homes out. Obviously, there have been some challenges with people being able to purchase that supply, and that's all understandable. But at the end of the day, we have a low inventory, or we had a low inventory market. We had an extremely low inventory market when COVID reared its ugly head. And, 2020, 2021, people were fighting over each other to try and get a house. I mean, there was an incredible amount of demand. And obviously over time, as prices and interest rates and therefore payments, right, affordability got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So when you look at listings, we are starting to see more and more properties not only hit the market, but stay on the market for longer. And they're getting less than what they thought they might get. A lot of that has to do with their pricing strategy. Now, for those of you that have listened to the show, you know that I'm a data junkie, right? Like I nerd out on this information because this is the kind of stuff that I absorb and then share with my listenership and then, of course, with my clients. You want somebody that represents you to be an expert, not just in this market, but in this process, so that they can help you understand what's going to happen before it happens, right? Identify issues before they become major problems, and give you direction so that you can, like I said, win in your real estate transaction. So we're starting to see more properties hit the market. We're starting to see them stay on the market for longer. Interestingly, though, we've seen that showings have actually gone up about 8% compared to 2024. So even with the affordability struggles that we have, we still have plenty of folks looking at homes. We still have a ton of inbound relocation from really all over the country. I mean, if you really want to expand it, it's really all over the world, because I've sold multi-million-dollar properties to people in Switzerland, in Poland, in Chile. I mean, there have been several folks from different countries that have purchased high-end property in Charleston, which I think is really interesting. A lot of people have questions about distressed properties. When are these going to start showing up? Are we going to become the next Florida? I had that question this week. I don't think so. I don't think we're anywhere near that kind of a market. Florida is hurting right now. Nashville's starting to hurt right now. All these little markets that kind of at the beginning of COVID started getting a lot of attention, right? A lot of inbound relocation to those areas have now started to slow down. And to an extent, the trend has kind of reversed, right? And now it's become a buyer's market rather than a seller's market. We're not there yet, but I'll get more into the numbers to help you understand why we're kind of trending in that direction. But I don't think we're the next Florida. We're not the next Miami. I mean, right as of 2025, 0.7% of all sales were quote unquote in distress, meaning a short sale, bank-owned property, right? Foreclosure, those types of things. And then ultimately, where did we end up with our price last year, right? So at the end of 2025 compared to the end of 2024, prices were up about 2.5%. And that's fairly in line with what projections were, both from myself and from national economists, folks from Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com and National Association of Realtors and blah, 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 blah. All were kind of in that 1 to 3, sometimes 4% range. And what was interesting is last year, those projections changed fairly drastically. I mean, look at Zillow and how inconsistent their projections were throughout the year, which I find interesting, by the way, because, I tend to be harsh with Zillow on this show, but I think it's because, honestly, people give their algorithms way too much credit, and I think we talked about this last time on this show, but just to put the nail in the coffin on this, let's be real, okay? Zillow does not know the condition of your home. It does not know the upgrades that you have in your home or the lack thereof. And they don't know your level of motivation. So if they don't know that for you, they don't know that for anybody else, which means that their analysis, right, their tool, their algorithm isn't as good as somebody that understands the value overlaid, of course, within the trends of an overall market to help you determine what your home will actually sell for. Right? How do you quantify the things that you've done to your home to determine what it's actually worth? There's no algorithm out there that's going to tell you that. Period. So if you really want to understand what your home is worth, you have to talk to a real estate professional or an appraiser. And if you talk to an appraiser, I mean, sure, they can provide you with an appraisal. They're going to charge you for that. Depending upon the property, it's going to be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. I mean, it's not $9,000, $500, $600, so on and so forth. I have seen some appraisals be, about $2,500. Depends on what we're appraising. I'm sorry, what they're appraising, because we're not appraisers. We're real estate agents. We provide you with market data just like an appraiser would. A really good real estate agent can make accommodations and adjustments to the value of your home for what your home has or doesn't have in comparison to other like-kind properties. But at the end of the day, just kind of putting a bow on what happened overall in our market in 2025. We had a little bit more appreciation, but things started to slow down. Demand started to stall a little bit as more properties hit the market and as they stayed on the market. And what's interesting is that when we look at the stats that we get, because what I just shared with you was provided to us by our local, Realtor Association, Charleston Trident Association of Realtors. In fact, you can get a lot of these reports online if you just go to charlestonrealtors.com, but it's going to be generic information. We hired an additional company, a statistician out of Atlanta, to run specific numbers for us so that we can better understand things like the impact of your initial asking price on your ultimate sales price, right? There's the difference between the listing price and the sales price. So depending upon where you price your home will dictate how long it stays on the market and then, frankly, how much of that asking price you're going to get. We have those stats. I want to read those to you next because there's some fascinating things in here. And at the end of the day, it kind of helps answer that question of, all right, I'm going to put my house on the market. Should I price it at what it's worth? Should I price it a little below what it's worth? Or should I price it a little above what it's worth and just leave some room for negotiation, right? So we're going to answer that question through data when we come back. Stick around. This is the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show here on the Big Talker, 1250 WTMA and WTMA.com. Remember, if you want to reach out to me and talk about the real estate market, about your specific situation, you're thinking of selling a home, buying a home, moving to the area, whatever we can do to help. My number, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. So what I want to do now is I want to get a little deeper, right? I want to talk more about strategy, right? We can take these trends, we can understand what's happening in the real estate market, and then we can apply that to individual situations because everybody's situation is going to be different, right? Some folks are going to say, hey, Brian, I don't have to sell my home in the next 30 days. I can wait, right? I can afford to wait. I'm not in a rush. I don't want to give my home away. I understand that. You also have other folks that are in, they have to sell. I mean, there's really not much of a choice. And let's be honest, as a real estate agent, we come across this probably more often than you might realize, but not every reason to sell a home is a happy reason to sell a home. And we deal with that quite a bit, whether it's probate or estate or divorce or what have you. And so when we look at these stats that this company we've hired provides us with, it really helps us when we sit down with somebody to talk strategy, right? Of course, when we're selling somebody's house, let me just give you a very quick kind of preview of what happens behind the scenes, right? So somebody calls, we talk, they're interested in selling their home, we gather information, we set up a time to meet with them to preview their house, determine what it's worth, talk about the marketing plan, how that revolves around the trends within their specific area and price range, how we find those buyers, so on and so forth, right? We do a lot of, or at least me personally, I can't speak to other real estate agents, but we're going to do a lot of research before we show up to that house so that we can give you a very in-depth analysis of your specific market, right? Your area, your price range. Those trends are going to differ from the broader market, certainly from the Charleston market, because of how varied our real estate is. You can't tell me that a $300,000 home in Goose Creek is going to receive the same attention and has the same trends as an $8 million home on Sullivan's Island. And that's part of the problem with generalized statistics, right? Is there's just not a lot that applies to everybody as a whole. We can understand the general trend within the market, but this report that I'm about to read off, which I am happy to give you a copy of, by the way, and by the way, just let's get on that. If you want a copy of this report, it's 34 pages. It breaks down our entire Tri-County market, right? Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester County, by price range. So we've selected 8 different price ranges: under 250, 250 to 300, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 650, 650 to $1 million, $1 million to $2 million, and then $2 million plus. Right? So those are our categories. And so what we do is we determine what's going on within those trends, within those price ranges, right? And so when we look at things like, you know, how I was mentioning earlier that as our market continues to kind of shift and flatten out a little bit, we're starting to see more and more properties not only hit the market, but stay on the market for longer. And so what happens to that, and the metric that we look at mostly to determine whether we are in a buyer's market or a normal market or a seller's market, is something called month supply of inventory. In other words, as of right now, if we did not put another home on the market, market-wide, how long would it take us to be sold out of all inventory? And right now, it's about 2.5 months, which is low. A normal market starts at around 6 months. So we're still technically in a seller's market in really every price range in Charleston. The one that takes a little bit longer, which is to be expected, is the 2 million plus price range. They're at about 4.5 months supply of inventory. 4.2 months supply of inventory. And that's just, there aren't as many people out there with $2 million plus budgets. But this is the point that I want to get across to you guys, because the question that everybody has when they go to list their home for sale is, what price should I choose? And we were talking last show a little bit about how your strategy with the price matters. So let me first say this. When people are looking for real estate online, they search in broad increments, right? There is not, unless you're, I'm not going to say unless you're a weirdo, but it would be very abnormal for you to go online to some random website and search for homes between $500,000 and $549,999. You're probably just going to do $500,000 to $550,000, right? Right. That's how people behave, right? So we have to understand human behavior. And if your home is worth what we think is probably $540,000, $545,000, it makes sense to list at $550,000. Why? Because we get all the people that are looking $500,000 to $550,000 and the people that are looking $550,000 to $600,000. If we price it at $549,000, we miss all the people that start their search at $550,000 and go up to $600,000. Or even worse, if you price your home at something like $499,900, you have missed all the people that have started their search at $500,000. So we have to understand the behavioral patterns of people and how they search online. But at the end of the day, I'll just put this very simply. The closer you list your home to fair market value, the faster it will sell and the more money you will make. Let me prove it. When we look at the original percent of their listing price received by sellers, market-wide, it's about 96.5%, right? So on average, every seller out there is taking 3.5% off of their asking price. All right. That's across the board. If you look at something like, the $1 to $2 million price range, they're getting 95%. If you look at something like the $5 to $650, they're getting 97.2%, the highest of any other price range that we pull. But what happens when properties are overpriced? How does that impact the owner's bottom line, right? The net amount of money that they receive at closing. The whole point's for you to make as much money as possible, right? And yes, there are going to be folks that don't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect offer because something has happened or changed in their life, and the home has to sell. I mean, they're not here because they want to try and bank the absolute most money possible. Something's going on. They need to sell their house. But if you look across the board, on median, it's going to take about 42 days to sell a property. That's up from 29 days last year. And some of these different price ranges have obviously, really the higher in price you go, the longer it takes to sell because of the fact that there are just less buyers in those price ranges. But here's where I want to get with this. The impact of price reductions on the overall sales price of the property. First of all, in the fourth quarter of last year, 53% of all listings had to reduce their price before they sold. That is up from 44% last year. If you look at something like the $300,000 to $400,000 price range, 62% of every sale required a price reduction before they sold it. That was up from 49% in 2024. And that's the same across the board. It is literally higher in all of these 8 different price brackets we've created. So we're seeing more price reductions. Well, what happens when those prices get reduced? First of all, the average price reduction amount is 6% of the asking price. All right. That's up from 5% last year. But when you reduce your price, ultimately properties sell for 92% of their original asking price. If they did not need to take a price reduction, guess what? They got 100% of their asking price. More often than not. If you're under $250,000, you got 98%. If you're $1 million to $2 million, you got 98.5%. And if you're $2 million plus, you got 97.2%. Everybody else got 100%. So what happens when you reduce the asking price of your home, right? Even when you reduce the price, you're going to have to take an additional about 1.5% off because you've lost the kind of like the new shiny feel of that property. Really, what I talked about last show was how people buy and sell based on a lot of emotion, right? I know you might not want to admit it, but it's true. I've been doing this for 20 years. I think I'm qualified to say that a lot of people are emotional about this process. So what happens when you reduce your asking price is not only does it increase your days on market, but after you reduce your asking price, you still have to take about 1.5% off, right? So here's the really interesting part. If you sold your home and you did not have to take a price reduction, then you got 100% of your asking price and you sold in 6 days. If you did have to take a price reduction, you got 92% of your asking price in 94 days. And by the way, if you previously listed with another real estate agent and it failed to sell, then those properties, which by the way represents 30% of all closings, then you're getting 89.6% of your asking price and you're selling in 155 days, right? So let me just reiterate that there is a significant amount of properties that are failing to sell when they hit the market, right? 30% of everything that actually sold was previously listed by another real estate agent. So that means they had to hire somebody new to go back on the market and actually get the job done. Well, in Q4 last year, literally 1/3, 33.1%. So, I mean, we're off by 0.2% there, but 33% of all properties that listed did not sell the first time they hit the market. That is up about 15% from last year. So let me just kind of put a bow on this. For every 100 properties that hit the market, 33 of them just won't sell the first time around. 67 of them will, right? Of the 67 that sell, 36 of them are going to take a price reduction, right? Which is 53% of all sales. And if you don't have to reduce your price, right, 31 of them are going to sell for full price or more, and it's only going to take 7 days. So if you take the 33 that fail to sell plus the 36 that have to reduce their price in order to sell, 69% of our inventory is overpriced. And I'll dig into that a little bit deeper because I have some more data that supports that. But that's the tail of the tape. But what's really interesting is that for those people that did not have to take a price reduction, that got 100% of their asking price, 27% of them actually got more than their asking price. So of those properties that priced it right, that sold in a week or less, that got at least their asking price, 1 out of 4 actually got more. So there are some interesting things happening in this market. I think a lot of it has to do with strategy and timing and the advice that you receive from your real estate agent, if that's who you choose to hire to, move forward with the sale, or if you go at it on your own, then best of luck to you. It's tough out there, but that's what's going on in our market. And on top of that, the last thing that I'll just say really quickly is that 56% of all sales included concessions to the buyer, which is yet another change in our market, right? 56%. Look at the $300,000 to $400,000 price range. I'm going to put some of these graphics up on the screen for those of you that watch these YouTube videos. But 71% of all sales had seller paid closing costs. And on average, they were $9,000. Market wide, it's $9,500, but $300,000 to $400,000. The average concession was $9,000. That's 2.5% to 3% of the purchase price. In addition to the fact that if you don't price your home correctly, you're only going to get, what's the number here? You're going to get 93% of your asking price. So really, it's like 90. So I point all this out to just tell you that, look, there are a lot of real estate agents out there. There are a lot of folks that are fighting tooth and nail to just have a sign in the ground, to have a listing, to have something to market, to have some new business. And this is the struggle that so many owners go through is the agent telling me something that I can really believe in and hang my hat on? Is their price suggestion realistic, or have they injected their own, interest into it, right? Are they afraid to tell you the truth? Because if they tell you the truth, it might mean that you just decide not to sell. And there's an old adage in real estate that it's better to have a sign in the yard than a sign in your trunk. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening right now with agents that just want the listing first, and then they'll try and figure out how to sell it later. And that's not what you want. If you want to interview somebody that has been there, done that, 20 years of experience, 1,500 homes sold, we'd love the opportunity. Give us a call. Our number, 843-800-0065. That comes straight to me. I'll be the one to answer it, 843-800-0065. If you want a copy of this report, 34 pages, a ton of data, just text the word report to 843-800-0065. Text the word report to 843-800-0065, and I'll send it right over to you. I want to take just a moment and tell you guys that I appreciate those of you that listen to this show. I really do. It's great for me to get out here every week and talk about the real estate market and really just kind of tell it like it is. I think there's just a lot of misinformation and frankly, a lot of mistrust in both our industry and in the information being put out about it or from us. So I appreciate those of you that view me as a trusted resource and that is somebody that is not going to pull punches on my opinion of the market. And frankly, it's pretty much the same when we meet and we talk about your situation. Because at the end of the day, I think you want to operate off of cold, hard facts, right? You want somebody that can tell it like it is so that you can make informed decisions, right? There are way too many people out there that are people pleasers that are just going to tell you what you want to hear. And I have seen firsthand, time and time and time again, that hurts the people that entrust those real estate professionals to help them with the sale of their home. How do I know that? Well, 60% of the listings that I have sold at least prior to COVID, were previously listed by other real estate agents, right? I was the guy that they called when they needed to actually get the job done. So they'd have a lot of agents that tried well, I think you can get this much for your house and you don't have to do a thing to it. Let's just get it on the market and see what the buyer's saying, blah, blah, blah. They get some showings, interest wanes. They try to reduce their price. It doesn't really work. They pull the property off the market after several months of trying, and then they hire somebody like me who has a bona fide marketing plan designed to literally identify buyers for that specific property proactively, right? We use demographic, geographic, behavioral data. We hyper-target our audiences. We promote our properties to those people rather than just stick it on a bunch of websites and hope somebody finds it, right? That's one of many things we do. But the point is we have a plan, right? A tried and true plan. We have a budget for that plan. It's not cheap selling real estate at a high level, but most people don't understand that, right? Because from a homeowner's perspective, a lot of the people that sell real estate are the same, right? It's a personality game. Who do they like more? And I like to think that I'm a likable guy, but at the end of the day, like I think experience goes a long way, especially in a market like this. A budget, manpower, experience, those I think are the things that you want so long as there's value to be had there. And so the last thing I'll just say really quickly is that we've got a variety of services at differing price points and commission percentages to help you accomplish your goals, whatever that might be. So I guess that's the end of my little infomercial here. But if you want to reach out to me, if you want to talk about what we do and how we're different and see if it might make sense for you and your situation, give us a buzz, 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Or again, check us out online, listingsincharleston.com, or check us out on YouTube. You know, that might be a great place for you to kind of get a sense of our personality. But anyways, let's finish up our conversation on just the market in general, because you guys need to understand, frankly, what to do with this information as a buyer or a seller or an investor or somebody that owns a property that they don't really need to sell it. Maybe it makes more sense to have it be managed by us, and let's find you a tenant and turn that property into income, because more than likely you've got a great interest rate on that property that you can't replicate somewhere else, right? The last thing I want to tell you really quickly, just with regard to market stats, is that there's something called an undervalued or undervalued percentage, and it's essentially an estimate of how over or undervalued current home values in the area are relative to the fundamentals dictated by local median incomes, right? So the overvaluation percentage is essentially calculated by comparing the area's current value to the income ratio to the long-term average. It's not a projection, right, for how much home prices are going to increase or decline. It's a measure, frankly, of risk, right? A higher overvaluation percentage leads to a riskier overall investment. So as of right now, the Charleston metro area, at least as of last month, was overvalued by about 9%. Typical home value was $424,000. Fair market value for those homes was $389,000. When you look at Charleston County, it's overvalued about 15%, Berkeley County 11, and Dorchester County 10. But here's some interesting things, right? If we look at some of these different areas, like downtown Charleston, right? 29401 is overpriced by 15%, but 29403 is only 5.5%. West Ashley is about 23%, James Island 27%, Folly Beach 16%, Hollywood, Megget, that area, it's about 25%. Mount Pleasant, below the IOP connector, right, 29464, that's 41%. 29466, 27%. Sullivan's Island, 53. IOP, 34. North Charleston, 13. The Dorchester Road area of North Charleston is overpriced by 37%. Somerville, depends on where you are. It's a big place, right? 29483 is 3.5% overpriced. 29485 is 20% overpriced. 29486 is only 6% overpriced. Adams Run, though, 53% overpriced. Eugene, 51% overpriced. And then Cordsville, between Berkeley County, it's Berkeley County, Moncks Corner, and Eugene, kind of that area, 78%. Johns Island, though, is undervalued by 5%. There's good opportunity on Johns Island. Alwendaw is undervalued by 14%, and McClellanville is undervalued by 15%. So there's some information for you there on just where some opportunity are, where some risk is in different areas of our market. If you want more information on some of these like higher level stats and really what they mean and how they apply to you and your situation, again, give us a call and I'll walk you through that. 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065. So what do we do with this information? If we're a buyer, if we're a seller, if we're an investor, if we're a property owner struggling between selling a property and maybe just keeping it as a rental, What do we do? How do we analyze and interpret those situations? How do we choose the best path forward? And then what does that plan look like, right? How are we actually going to accomplish that? And I think that's one thing that, quite frankly, before I take a quick break, is a real struggle in our business. From the consumer's perspective, is that you'll have a lot of real estate agents that talk a really good game. They really do. They've gotten to be experts in the presentation of business strategies. The question is whether they're actually getting done. The question is whether they're actually doing those things behind the scenes. Are these things that they have the ability to do? Are these things that look good on paper? Are these things that are never fact-checked? I can't tell you the number of real estate agents that are the number one agent in fill in the blank. I mean, just go and email 100 real estate agents and you'll find a few of them that are at least number one. I don't know if it means that they're number one at selling real estate on a Tuesday when it's raining, or whatever. There's a lot of people that have a lot of accolades attached to their name and no one really ever fact checks them. But the point is, if you're thinking about getting into this market, having a plan, having an experienced professional that can guide you through all of this and help you not just save, but make money in the process is, I think, what people are looking for. And I appreciate all of you that have reached out over the course of the past few months that listen to the show or watch our videos on YouTube and so on and so forth. We really do appreciate the business and we love helping folks. So if we can help you with that, 843-800-0065 is my number, 843-800-0065, or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com. And lastly, YouTube, right? iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, just search the Brian Beatty Team or the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show, and you'll find us. Thanks for sticking with me today as we talk about the status of the real estate market here in Charleston. If you're just joining us, check us out on YouTube where we put all of our shows. You can also check us out on Spotify and iTunes and Google Play in podcast form. But I want to end the show with this, right? What are we going to do with this information? How do we, as real estate agents, analyze and interpret and present this data in a meaningful way to individuals who have completely different goals, right, from maybe one another? Maybe somebody needs to sell now and the price is important, but it's not the number one thing. Timing is the number one thing. Maybe you've got the opposite person, which frankly is probably the majority of sellers out there, which is, hey, I don't have to sell. I really don't. I don't have to sell. I would like to sell, but nothing is forcing me to sell my property at a loss or a perceived loss. And so what they do, more often than not, is they say, well, if I'm not motivated to sell, I really don't want to price my home aggressively. So let's leave some room for negotiation, right? Maybe we try to let's see if we can get lucky, right? Once in a blue moon, it happens, right? You do get lucky. You find somebody that loves the home so much, they might be willing to overpay a little bit for it. But more often than not, they're pretty well informed on value in this area, in this price range, because they've been looking at listings online. They've been waiting for new inventory to hit the market. You take the buyer right now today, they are very invested in new listings as they hit the market because they're basically, in some instances, feeling like they're having to wait until spring to find the really good options, which, hint, hint, could be a nice opportunity for sellers that want to get ahead of the pack and not have a herd mentality, because when everybody else lists their home in spring, you then have more competition, right? So as a seller, it might make sense to try and beat them to the punch. It all is going to depend on what's happening in your area, in your price range. We can look at timing a market, and we've done so successfully a lot. But again, it's data-driven. We want to really understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then we, as somebody that really understands the market, will then help craft a strategy to accomplish that. So, I think if you're a seller in this market right now, hold multiple interviews, right? If you find somebody that you really like, hold them accountable, right? Make sure that there are things in their agreement that they have to abide by. I mean, for us, as an example, we have a communication guarantee, which is like the number one problem in our industry. So if you feel like we're not communicating well with you, if we don't reach out to you at least once per week from the time you list until the time you sell, you can fire us. In fact, you can cancel your agreement at any time because we have an easy exit guarantee, which just means at any point in time, we can be fired. We give you that ability. The standard real estate agreement does not allow for that, by the way. When you're locked in, unless the agent gives you an out in writing, which we do because we understand that it's our responsibility to earn your business, to do what we say we're going to do, right? So I would hire an agent that has accountability measures built into their agreement, that really understands how to position your home to sell, and that isn't afraid to tell you the truth. We have way too many agents out there telling people what they want to hear. And as you heard from the stats that I read, over half of our listings need a price reduction. Basically, 1 in 3 that hit the market don't even sell. They have to hire another real estate agent in order to get the job done, or let that listing expire and then try again. But then on the other side of the coin, you have all these folks that are seeing massive success, and it's strategy based, right? Of course, hitching, you got to find the right, it's a horse and jockey situation. You want to obviously find the right jockey. And I don't know if I want to call a house or a seller a horse. That might not be the best analogy. I might have to run that one back. But the point is, as a seller, you need somebody that has a bona fide marketing plan specific to your house that will reach buyers interested in your specific house. If I'm a buyer in this market right now, I'm looking for opportunity, right? Obviously, if the right home hits the market at the right price and I'm interested, I'll buy it. I'm speaking, theoretically as a buyer. But there are going to be plenty of opportunities for buyers to get great deals on things from folks that overpriced their home, that are now languishing on the market, and that are becoming more desperate and frustrated with the process, and they just want to be done, right? And even then, as a real estate agent, you can't force a buyer to make an offer because the last thing we want to do is look like we're so desperate for a sale that we're willing to give something away. But that's a challenge, a real challenge for sellers right now, which is an opportunity for buyers. I think investors are going to see some opportunity as well. And then property management's holding steady. We're doing a great job at helping people keep their properties maintained and turning them into cash flowing assets. So if we can help you with any of those things, if you want to reach out to us and have a conversation, my number is 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Check us out on listingsincharleston.com. You guys enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.
Join us for another edition of the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show next Saturday morning at 9 and Sunday morning at 10. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065.